Keep it tight. All right. Okay. When we get to
I got a new job.
the combined.
What are you doing?
I'm doing the anti-poverty, the brand new anti-poverty program at senior high and the high school.
If you folks could take a seat, that would be great. We'll continue with our hearings. We have still quite a bit of work to do today, and we are anxious to get back to it, as you might expect. I'll just make this observation while people are coming and going. We've covered a couple of bills that were in some ways contentious, and I appreciate the respect both sides have shown one another. The other side, in the way you've conducted yourself today. So hopefully that will continue through the rest of the day. I will just tell you that depending on how the next two bills go, when we get to LB167, we may put a time limit on both the proponents and the opponents. And that's not intended to be dismissive or to represent a lack of interest in the subject matter. I think a lot of people have an interest in the subject matter. What we want to do is get a diversity of opinion, and that will help guide us. So we'll leave it to the proponents and the opponents to kind of work out who's going to testify. With that, we'll open on LB504, and that brings us to Senator Hunt. Welcome to the Judiciary Committee.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Lathrop and members of the Judiciary Committee. I'm Senator Megan Hunt, that's Meganhunt, and I represent District 8 in Midtown, Nebraska, which includes the neighborhoods of Dundee and Benson, around Memorial Park, Keystone. Today I bring you LB504, a bill to expand the current definition of hate crimes to include crimes based on gender identity. Gender identity refers to an individual's internal concept of their gender, regardless of their sex assigned at birth. If you take a look at the handout I presented to you, you'll see that 21 legislatures across the country have moved to include crimes based on gender identity in their hate crime laws, including Nebraska's neighboring states of Missouri and Colorado. We currently take the statutes that protect Nebraskans from hate crimes for granted. We simply regard them as a standard part of our criminal code. However, when LB90, the bill that first established enhanced penalties for hate crimes in Nebraska, was introduced in 1997, it was met with fierce opposition. Nevertheless, the bill prevailed, and Nebraska became the third to the last state in the nation to write prohibitions against hate crimes into law. Since 1997, we have seen a panoply of other protections established nationwide in recognition of the complex nature of identity. We do not want to be, once again, on the tail end of the evolution of civil rights in this country. When the motive for a violent crime is based on a victim's identity, it becomes a hate crime. Nebraska's hate crime statutes currently consider race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender, and sexual orientation as a part of an individual's identity. Identity is multifaceted, and its study is a burgeoning area in the sciences. When we talk about it, we have to think about its many complex intersections, including gender identity, which is an identity widely accepted and defined by the medical establishment. Passage of LB504 would simply bring legal acknowledgement to the fact that gender identity is a well-recognized part of identity, and that many Nebraskans are persecuted and become targets of violent crimes because of it. Opponents may say that there's no need for this bill, but when there is a day dedicated to the remembrance of transgender people because of the sheer number of murders committed against them each year, we have to recognize that there is undoubtedly a need to update our hate crime statutes with this legislation. Back in the 90s, it took the gruesome, racially motivated murder of Kenyatta Bush, an Omaha North High School student, to legislate protections against crimes motivated by race. Brandon Tina, a 21-year-old trans man, was raped and murdered in Falls City, Nebraska in 1993. Do we have to wait for another transgender person to lose their life in Nebraska before we take proactive measures to protect people of all identities? Hate crimes not only impact victims and their families, but they instill debilitating fear in the communities they target. Passage of LB166 would send a message that Nebraska is not a haven for bigotry and hatred, but a place where all are welcome to put down roots without fear of harassment, discrimination, or violence. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
I do not see any questions, Senator Hunt. But
Thank you, Chairman.
Have you closed when we're done?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I'll stick
Those
around.
who are testifying, we'll start out with proponents if you want to come forward. And if there's more than one, if you want to sit in the front row, we'll work you through the chair. You're the first up.
Perfect.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Judiciary Committee.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Senators, for the opportunity to provide testimony this afternoon. My name is Eric Reiter. That's E-R-I-C-R-E-I-T as in Tom, E-R. And I am the community organizer for Out Nebraska, Nebraska's only statewide organization working to empower and celebrate Nebraska's LGBTQ community. Out Nebraska stands in full support of LB504. The National Center for Transgender Equality reports that more than 1 in 4 transgender people has faced a bias-driven violent crime, and rates are higher for transgender women and transgender people of color. 78% of transgender students report being harassed or assaulted. Current Nebraska law for enhanced penalties already enumerates race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, age, and disability. This legislation sends a societal message that it's not okay to target, intimidate, harass, or commit acts of violence against people based on who they are. It is unclear how the current law could be used in regard to crimes committed against transgender people. Expanding our enumerated list to include gender identity clarifies that transgender people are included. Failing to include transgender people in this legislation sends the message that violent crimes against transgender people are acceptable. In our current climate, it is more important than ever that transgender people are specifically included. This is a story collected by Out Nebraska. I was a gender nonconforming teenager in the OPS school system. When I was a freshman, I was bullied by a girl in my algebra class all year. She perceived me as a lesbian and told me I had to be straight, that I was too disgusting to get a man, but that I needed to be straight. She talked in detail about gay sex acts in class and about how she thought they were disgusting and how I was nasty for wanting them, but I had never spoken about my sex life to her. One day near the end of the year, she punched me in the face in class and called me a faggot. I cried and no one said anything. The teacher acted as if he did not notice. When I brought up the conflict with the administration, it was brushed off as a mutual conflict that we needed to talk through. Please update the current enhanced penalty law to specifically include transgender Nebraskans.
Thank you, Eric, for your testimony and for speaking for your organization. I don't see any questions for you today.
Okay, thank you.
For being here. Next testifier, please.
Hello, good afternoon. My legal name is Anna Stenka, that's S-T-E-N-K-A, and otherwise I'm known as Mar Lee, and I'm here to testify as a proponent of LB504. I am testifying as a Nebraskan who is a member of the LGBTQIA community. I am non-binary and queer, and due to these parts of my identity, I have lived in fear of being physically harmed. I grew up hearing kids, on the playground playing things like smear the queer and using derogatory and transphobic and homophobic language to refer to others. So that left me closeted in hiding these parts of my identity for the entire time in which I attended Alma Public High Schools. And that was a very hard time. And for those of you who don't know that, hiding these parts of your identity, whether it is your sexuality or gender identity, is very psychologically stressful. And I was already experiencing at a young age symptoms of depression and anxiety due to a number of other factors, but having to hide my gender identity attributed to that further. From the age of 12, I started self-harming and continued to struggle with this for 8 years. And at the age of 16, I was so extremely depressed and because I was being denied the right to safely live as my genuine and true self in my community. And almost exactly 5 years ago, on February 11th, 2014, I attempted to overdose and kill myself and was submitted to Richard Young Hospital in Kearney, Nebraska for 1 week. I was so tired of living in fear of other people attacking me and hating me that I decided that it was better not to live at all. Since then, I have received psychological help and now have a support system where I can finally have felt safe enough to come out of the closet in regards to my gender identity of being non-binary in just this last year in 2018. Since coming out, my quality of life has improved greatly, my depression and anxiety are more manageable, but the fears are still there. The fear that every time there isn't a gender-neutral bathroom available and I have to go with my assigned sex bathroom in a woman's, that I'm going to be asked what I'm doing because of my gender non-conforming and androgynous appearance. I have fears of when I'm walking down the street, or the other day when I went to the DMV, these "what are you" looks when people try and figure out my gender identity or sex. In 2018, there were 24 reported murders of transgender people across the nation. The majority of the victims were transgender women of color. Two things that we know are that transgender people exist within Nebraska and that the transgender individuals face discrimination, assault, and homicide due to their gender identities. Knowing these two things, it only makes sense that Nebraska legislators do their duty to protect all Nebraskans, including transgender and gender nonconforming Nebraskans, by voting yes to LB504 and pushing it through. And it took me years to realize that my life matters and that I have a right to exist without fear of threat for my gender identity. In a state that has many legislators and politicians that claim themselves as pro-life, please acknowledge that after birth, my life still matters and deserves to be protected by Nebraska law by voting yes to LB504. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you go by Marley?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Marley, for being here today.
Thank you.
Spike. Welcome back to the Judiciary Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop and members of the committee. My name is Spike Eicholt, S-P-I-K-E. Last name is E-I-C-K-H-O-L-T, appearing on behalf of the ACLU as a proponent to LB504. We want to thank Senator Hunt for introducing the bill. This bill is straightforward, and I would submit that compared to many of the bills that you're going to hear today, that this should be a very easy decision for the committee. Why is this bill necessary? The bill is necessary for the reasons that Senator Hunt explained and from the last two people who testified, and that is crimes that are motivated by hate, particularly violent crimes, should be treated differently than crimes motivated by other reasons. Crimes of assault that are motivated by hate directed toward the victim because of who that victim is, whether it's that person's race, their religion, their gender identity, should be treated differently than assaults that are caused by an incident or a reaction or something like that. The legislature, this state, made that decision as a policy in 1997 when they created the hate crime statutes. And at that time, they did include the category, along with race, religion, and gender. They also included the category of sexual orientation. There was some debate. I happened to be working there when we did that bill, when the legislature passed that bill. And there was debate over the category of sexual orientation and what it would mean, what it's going to cause, and so on. But ultimately, and if you look at page 5 of the bill, the decision is pretty straightforward. The protected classes, or the designation of the motivation for the person committing these crimes, it's only triggered, it's only implicated if a person commits a crime. If the defendant assaults somebody, and the state can show that that defendant assaulted that person because of that victim's race, they're punished more. This is not an issue of employment. It's not an issue of housing or public accommodation or cakes or anything like that. It's simply the state making a very clear statement, and that is we won't tolerate hate directed toward people. LB504 adds gender identity to that list. Every year, the Crime Commission notes and has statistics on hate crimes committed in the state. You can look at that online. Actually, I was going to bring my copy up, but I must have left it back at my desk. And you can track and you can see the trends. There are hate crimes in this state. You've heard from the last two testifiers that trans people are targeted for who they are, and you know nationally from the statistics that they are as well. I did have distributed a handout which shows the other hate crime laws by states. Most other states have a hate crimes law. It's got different colors, but the notation of it, the hate crime statutes being fully inclusive, which would mean including gender identity and sexual orientation and race and religion. You can see that 3 of our neighboring states are fully inclusive, and it's time that Nebraska should be as well. We would urge the committee to advance the bill, and I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Mike. I don't see any questions. Thanks for your testimony. Next proponent.
Hi. Thank you for hearing me again. For the record, my name is Angie Slough-Phillips. It's SALAHOU-PHLIPS, and I'm here today on behalf of the Douglas County Democratic Party Women's Caucus to show our full support for LB504 as introduced by Senator Hunt. We've actually submitted letters of support for all of this afternoon's hearings. Part of the mission of the Women's Caucus is to empower women of all ages and advocate for women's rights. We are committed to ending violence against women in all its forms, including hate crimes across lines of gender and sexuality. The Women's Caucus believes crimes committed because of a victim's gender identity or association with a person of a certain gender identity is in fact a hate crime, and we support holding perpetrators of such violence fully accountable. We urge you to move forward LB504 in order to ensure the LGBTQ+ community receives justice for hate crimes committed against them, especially when, according to the ACLU, violence against trans women and non-binary folks has hit record highs of 1 in 4 trans persons being violently attacked for being trans, with most of those attacks being directed at trans women of color. Sexual violence occurs at an even higher rate, with nearly 50% of trans and non-binary folks being violated. We urge this committee to move LB504 forward and impose enhanced penalties and civil action for these hate crimes.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Appreciate your testimony. You're opposed? 1 second. Anyone else here in support of this bill that cares to be heard? We'll go on to opposition testimony.
The ranks are thinning here. Robert Klotz. Oh, wait for you to hit your button there.
Go ahead.
Robert Klotz. ROBERTKLOTZ. LB504 is a discriminatory bill that gives a pseudo-white privilege status to the gender misassigned, confused, the delusional, or worse, the deviant. All citizens of Nebraska are to be treated equally under the law, and the passage of this bill would spit in the face of the decent citizens of Nebraska who expect and demand equality under the law. Underline 30 to 31 reads, gender identity means a person's internal sense of their own gender, regardless of the sex the person was assigned at birth. Let me get this straight. You want to give a perfectly normal man who is delusional, or worse, deviant, special rights over the non-delusional constituency that you are to serve. How does that make sense? It doesn't. This is simply a feel-good bill that a weak-kneed politician can vote for so they can bow down at the altar of the faddish political correctness goddess. The pain from an assault on a gender-confused person is no more painful or devastating than assault on someone who is not confused. Treat everyone equal. I thought that is what the whole LGBT movement said it wanted, equality. This bill simply caters to the LGBT movement, giving them special status. It would be more helpful if there was first a study done on the whole LGBT movement and ask if it is a good thing for Nebraska, and are the claims of the LGBT valid. Benjamin Franklin said, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Virtue was understood as morally good, acting in conformity to the moral law, practicing the moral duties, and abstaining from vice as a virtuous man. This bill lacks morals, as do all the other presented here today. The question is how virtuous or lack thereof has this unicameral become. This bill will not make anyone safer. It is not a magic wand. The law against murder has been on the books forever, and simply to pass this law is a feel-good law that will not protect anybody.
Okay. Your opposition is duly noted. Anyone else here to speak in opposition? Come forward. Good afternoon.
Sure, my name is Amber, A-M-B-E-R. Last name is Parker, P-A-R-K-E-R. I find it interesting that when we are looking at legislation of LB504, in law we should not have favoritism of a person based upon the job they have, if they're a state senator, if they're the governor, if they're the attorney general. Law is supposed to be fair. LB504 actually is bringing a clear vision of those who want to bring favoritism, and I don't think some people understand that when we introduce legislation, we have to think of a population. We can't look and personalize certain areas and take and declare something as law. I would love to see law enforcement come up here and share things. Have we thought of the intent or what it could take our law enforcement to? We now have created a bill, in essence, as a conscience police through our law enforcement. How? Because when they're gathering facts and doing these things, who's going to be the determining factor to look at the evidence if there was so a hate crime? But remember, we're innocent till proven guilty, every single one of us. And I believe that's in our Constitution. And correct me if I'm wrong in whatever I'm saying. I believe we need to work together as a people. And I believe that legislation like LB504 only brings division and not unity. Why do I say this? Because we are denying the scientific facts of the body. We now have put into a degree of, again, going back to our law enforcement. How about evidence in the hospital? How does this pertain to doctors and gathering evidence? You can't just look at LB504 and put a text on top and say everything goes. We know that things evolve through criminal investigations. So you now have, again, LB504 would be creating a thought police. I want to speak on a testimony of myself. I'm a children's author of a book titled God Made Dad and Mom. It was endorsed by Family Research Council and American Family Association President Tim Wildman. Senator Moorfield, I find it so interesting you're smugging about these things. But what I will say to you is those organizations have been recognized by the Southern Poverty Law Center. But you know, one thing I want to talk about is unity. Not one of us created that a baby can just be made between one man and one woman. My children's book is on the Judeo-Christian view of family. There's nothing hateful about it. But what I will tell you is that I don't know what you declare as a hate crime, but to me, there's been persecution. People have taken my characters and done things. There's been a ton of Amazon comments against me and bullying, and even I don't want to go into the violent actions of some people encouraging. But where does LB504, Senator Hunt, protect people like myself that have written a book like God Made Dad and Mom to make sure that if there was any type of a law broken or criminal activity? But to me, it just sets them in a whole new category and puts me on the other side. We all are people.
We have a 3-minute time limit.
Yeah,
May
no,
come in
thank you, Senator.
So you might not have known that, but let's see if there's any questions. And
Sure.
I see no questions from any of the senators, so we appreciate your coming down here today.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify in opposition to LB504? Anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity? Seeing none, I have a few several letters to read into the record, and then we'll have Senator Hunt close. In support, we have letters from Aaron Huck, Matt Himes, Justin Lewis, Amy Martin, Cody Wolken, Patrick Habecker, Katie Madlinger, Sarah Hannafy, National Association of Social Workers, Jenny Goss, Catherine Lohmeyer, Allison Mills, Ella Durham, Angela Thomas, Robert Wade, Sarah Davis, Catherine Nyberg, Sherry Martin, Marty Howard, Emily Kaziak, Samuel Bates, Susan Sorrenti, David Harms, Joni Denny, Helen Moore, Megan Sally, Sarah Brumfield, Waylon Werner, Murray Kim, Annie Johnson, in opposition from Donna Owen, Nate Gratz of the Nebraska Family Alliance, Rob Rob, Jeremiah Fielnor, Rob and Karen McNeff, Charletti Ralston, Justin Dick, and Henry Burke. There are no neutral letters, and with that, you are good to close.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop, and thank you, members of the Judiciary Committee. The scope of LB504 is very narrow. It's meant to protect transgender people from hate crimes by adding gender identity to our hate crime statute. If any other senator wanted to bring a bill to protect any other group of people, it would get a public hearing as well, and I would encourage any of you to do that if you want to, of course. Passing this bill would just ensure that justice is dispensed for people who have been victims of prejudiced violence. That's what that statute is for. According to the Nebraska Crime Commission in 2017, I can tell you that 25% of hate crimes were directed toward LGBTQ people. So that's a lot. That's a high number. These people need protections, and I urge you to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. That will close our hearing on LB504. Senator Hunt is also the sponsor of LB166, and she will next open on that bill. Welcome again.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop, and thank you to the members of the Judiciary Committee. I'm Senator Megan Hunt, Megan Hunt, and I represent District 8. Today I'm presenting LB166, a bill to eliminate the use of the gay and trans panic defense in Nebraska courts. This legislation is supported by the American Bar Association and has passed several other states already. The gay and trans panic defense is a legal defense strategy that aims to demonstrate to a court or jury that the sexual orientation of a victim to a violent crime is to blame for their death or injury. Historically, these defenses have been used by defendants in three ways: to claim insanity or diminished capacity because a sexual proposition by the victim triggered a nervous breakdown in the defendant, to bolster a defense of provocation by arguing that a victim's sexual advance, although entirely nonviolent, was sufficiently provocative to induce the defendant to kill, or to contend that the defendant reasonably believed the victim was about to cause the defendant serious bodily harm because of the victim's sexual orientation or gender identity. This defense is brought to mitigate sentences for murder charges to manslaughter or justified homicide. Sexual orientation or gender identity cannot ever excuse violence, and our courtrooms should not be used as chambers of hate. In fact, it should be noted that using this defense could be evidence of a hate crime. This needs to be one point of conversation in a broader conversation about how LGBTQ people are treated in the criminal justice system and in our society more broadly, which I understand is kind of the theme today. It's easy to say that these things don't happen that often, that it doesn't happen in Nebraska, but that's missing the point. The use of this defense shows a court system that places LGBTQ lives lower than their straight peers. Just because most people are heterosexual doesn't make this okay. Just because people in the legislature, lawmakers, may not know people personally who this has affected doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It means that we have an opportunity to be leaders and end a discriminatory practice in our state. The legislation that I have proposed would ensure that victims of LGBTQ hate crimes and their families receive justice, and the perpetrators of such crimes are held accountable. This defense strategy is a remnant of a bygone era of legalized discrimination and normalized antipathy toward this community. This law works to bring the law up to date with current medical and psychological standards and understandings of human sexuality and gender. In 2013, the American Bar Association issued a resolution urging all levels of government to take legislative action to curtail the availability of the gay and trans panic defenses. Many cities and municipalities have done this. California did this. Both houses of the Illinois legislature unanimously passed a bill to prohibit the use of this defense, and Republican governors signed it into law. As the legislative actions of these jurisdictions have demonstrated to the rest of the country, this is not partisan, this is not controversial, this is about ensuring equality in the court. The purpose of this committee is to determine whether this issue is worthy of law. I brought this to you, and I want to work together to make this acceptable to everybody in the body. Some people might say this is a solution in search of a problem, or the solution doesn't live in the legislature. That's something we hear. That the LGBT community doesn't face this kind of crime in Nebraska. But as I said earlier, according to an annual report from the Nebraska Crime Commission, 25% of hate crimes in Nebraska are motivated by anti-LGBT sentiments. So I urge you to think of the members of the LGBT community, many of whom are here today, of course, in support of this legislation, who have suffered disproportionately high rates of violence in Nebraska, and I hope you make the decision to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Are there folks here testifying in support of this bill? Two people? Okay. Somebody can sit in the chair and the other person can be on deck. Or persons, if there are more. Okay, come on up. You can sit in these chairs here if you're going to testify so we can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator Lathrop and the members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Kimberly O'Donnell, KIMBERLEYO'Donnell, and I currently live in Legislative District 7. I am here today in support of LB166. I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. Apart from leaving for university, I have lived here my entire life. I am a 21-year-old trans woman, and I am here to ask you to see me and to make sure that you hear me. As a child, I grew up dreaming of living a long and fulfilling life, being extended the same inherent ability to exist, the right to dignity, respect, and to live. Unfortunately, as I aged, I quickly learned a different reality, a reality that many of my peers do not have to face. According to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, an overview of violence against LGBTI persons between January 1, 2013 and March 31, 2014, 80% of trans people murdered during that time were 35 or younger. I am 21. These numbers are not getting any better. There is a gross epidemic across this country and world where trans people, specifically trans women of color, are being murdered. We are being murdered, and not enough people are talking about this. Allowing individuals guilty of murder to utilize a gay or trans panic defense is inherently inhumane to the memory of the victim who was murdered. Not supporting the LB166 sends a message that it is okay to murder trans bodies. It sends a message that it is okay to murder trans people. It sends a message that trans bodies, lives, and memories are not worthy of the very dignity that you and other cis people hold. That is un-American. It is not living in human goodness. I ask you now to stand for goodness, to stand for the memories of thousands of trans people who have been murdered, to make Nebraska a place where trans bodies and lives and memories are sacred, valued, and protected. That is true goodness. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. We appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Abby Swatsworth, ABBISWATSWORTH. I'm here today speaking for Out Nebraska, Nebraska's only statewide organization working to empower and celebrate Nebraska's LGBTQ community. Out Nebraska stands in full support of LB166. gay and transgender panic defenses have been asserted by defendants in criminal trials throughout the U.S. since the 1960s. In these cases, defendants have argued that their violent behavior was a rational response to discovering that the victim was LGBTQ. I'm going to leave the remainder of my testimony to the written that I've shared with you, but I would like to share a personal story gathered by Out Nebraska to illustrate that these crimes do in fact happen in our great state. I was assaulted on a date with a man who knew about my appearance, which is gender nonconforming and can be ambiguous. I'd been on a date with him before in a public location, but this time he was introducing me to two of his friends who were not forewarned. They could not tell my sex by looking at me at the time. They turned against their friend and asked him if he was gay and why he would have sex with a tranny like me. My date then spoke about not knowing that I was a man. I guess that they thought I was. I was pushed and kicked. I was punched and called names like faggot and dyke. I felt overpowered and was not strong enough to fight back. A hand went down my pants, and I don't quite remember much after that. I don't believe I was sexually assaulted, but I do know I was left to bleed on the pavement. This happened on a summer late afternoon evening at Jean Leahy Mall in downtown Omaha. I was light out, and people were around. No one helped me. No one offered me a hand to help me up. I took the bus home and didn't speak a word of it for another year. I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
I don't see any questions, but thanks for that testimony.
Thank you.
And your thoughts on the subject? Oh, I'm sorry. If you want to come back, I missed Senator Wayne.
I just want you to know I don't often recognize this publicly, but I hear you and I see you, and I think it's important that you share this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Karina McCormick, C-A-R-I-N-A-M-C-C-O-R-M-I-C-K. See, I'm almost forgetting my last name. Comma, PhD, please. I'm a little bit out of breath because I took 2 hours vacation time to come here at 1:30 to testify this bill, and then the order got switched around. So I went back to work, couldn't leave until 5. Rode my bike here from UNL. You know, that's not that close. So that's why I'm out of breath. But I want to testify in support of this bill, particularly getting rid of the absurdity of the gay panic defense, especially in regard to people being hit on, like at a bar or at any gathering, or having unwanted social advances, or sexual advances, or romantic advances, whether or not there had been a prior relationship. That's part of the bill. And I feel that I am justified to speak about this because I have had very, very, very many episodes in my life of unwanted romantic and sexual advances, and I am very pleased to report to you that in 0 of those instances have I felt the need to use violence as a result. And actually, that's really, really reasonable. That another human being shows interest in you, you don't respond to the interest the same way, and you let them know. I can't imagine any world in which a person would think that that interest would be justification for violence. And as an example, I've prepared a list of some things that you can do instead of violence when someone hits on you that you don't want to be hit on. You can say, I'm not interested. Or you could say, I can buy my own drink. Thank you. Some other ones I've liked to use are, I just want to read my book. I just want to talk to my friends. Sometimes I will say, you're really not my type. Not that often, but sometimes. And if that doesn't work, I'll say, could you please just leave me alone? That's also another really good option that isn't violence. And I think that's a really good baseline for our legal system, that's sort of normal human interaction. Lastly, there's always the approach that's one of my very favorites, which is get up and walk away. Because you're not interested, and that's the end of the story. Violence shouldn't be necessary, and violence shouldn't be protected in our state law.
Okay. I did notice that you came in here at the very last second and out of breath. And
My
I apologize for the calendar. It happens.
My paper was folded in my bag from earlier. Yeah, so any questions?
Yeah, no. Thank you for being here today. Anyone else here to testify in support of LB166? Anyone here to testify in opposition?
Good evening, Chairman Lathrop and members of the committee. My name is Spike Eichel, S-P-I-K-E, last name E-I-C-K-H-O-L-T, appearing on behalf of the Nebraska Criminal Defense Attorneys Association, opposed to the bill. I first want to state that nothing in my testimony is directed at anyone here, and certainly nothing that's ever happened to anyone here. I did talk to Senator Hunt a number of times about this bill since it's been introduced, and she did these drafts of possible amendments and so on, but ultimately I explained to her that I think our association, well, I know our association is still opposed to the bill. I've listed and handed out a letter explaining some of our objections to the bill. The first most fundamental objection is this: as an association, we oppose any effort to place a restriction in statute on our ability to meaningfully or even not meaningfully to present a defense on behalf of our clients. Everyone is entitled to a defense to a criminal charge, even if that defense is offensive, even if it's absurd. You are still entitled to that defense, and sometimes that's the only defense you may have. So I understand, and our association is not unsympathetic to the reasons behind this bill, but one thing is clear in legislatures: if there's one bill, there'll be another one, and we're just not going to concede that point where we can put in statute the elimination of seemingly frivolous or offensive defenses. Second, we would argue the bill is unnecessary. In 1993, our Supreme Court rejected this type of defense, State versus Lowe, and I've got it cited in the handout. In that case, at the trial level, a defendant to a homicide case tried to argue that he assaulted and killed the victim because the victim came onto him. The trial judge didn't let him introduce the evidence, and the Supreme Court said, that's right, the trial judge is right, that's not relevant. So arguably, the system works under the general rules of evidence and not just under 27403, the general rule of evidence, but also evidence with respect to expert testimony. Arguably, this would interfere oddly with the hate crime prosecution. You know, when we pitched this bill to our members, a lot of them had never really heard of it before, and there's a structural reason why, and that's this. You heard 504 before. If my client is charged with assault, a justification defense is, I did it, comma, because, right? You're not going to advance a justification defense of a hate crime as a defense. In other words, I did it because that person was pretending to be a man, or I did it because that person is gay, because one, the jury's going to reject it, and all you're going to get your client convicted of is a more serious charge. So there's already some problem, I would submit, with what the bill proposes with our hate crime law. And finally, the bill only targets criminal defendants. It doesn't apply to prosecutions. So prosecutors under this bill are free to adduce evidence that might shame or humiliate witnesses. It doesn't apply at all to civil cases, and for those reasons, we would oppose the bill.
Okay. Senator Wayne has a question for you.
I actually thought of the opposite scenario. If we passed the previous bill, and my client, I guess it's a form of a question, but I'll get there. My client says, no, I know he's heterosexual or she's heterosexual. Under this bill, I'd have no ability to prove that.
Under this bill, you wouldn't even be able to let your client say what you just said, and that is, I know that person's a heterosexual, because if you look at the bill, the defendants can't adduce evidence as to that victim's sexual orientation. Now, the prosecutor might be able to do it, and the prosecutor might want to do it if they're proving the hate crime allegation. And that's the other part of the law. I mean, in cases, evidence can be omitted for limited purposes. But I don't know how the judges are going to figure it out, and I certainly don't know how the judges are going to explain it to juries in that situation, that you can consider this for purposes of finding him guilty of a hate crime, but not for any kind of other defense or anything else.
Thank you.
Your other point, if I understand it, is if we include or pass the bill on hate crimes, then somebody trying to offer this as a defense is just getting themselves deeper into hot water and turning a assault into a hate crime.
You could swing for the fences, so to speak, as a defendant and get some fly-by-night doctor who's going to come in and diagnose you with Gabe-Hanning syndrome or something like that and try to get the judge to instruct the jury. But in reality, I would never try that, even if you could get an expert to say something like that. Because when the dust settles in a justification defense, you're conceding you committed the crime. And if you agree that you did it because of a person's gender identity, you're conceding the more serious offense.
Okay, I think we understand. We have another question for you. Senator Slama.
Sorry, I just have one. So just to reiterate, for my understanding, the type of defense that would not be permitted under this law hasn't even been raised since that 1993 State v. Lowe ruling?
At least not in any published opinions that I saw.
Okay.
You know, somebody could have tried it and not appealed or been rejected. I've never known anyone to do it. The only time, frankly, I've ever heard the issue of why somebody did something is when the defendant's trying to keep that evidence out to a hate crime charge. They don't want it coming in, right? What they said at the time. They don't want that in. But I haven't seen a published opinion since 1993.
That's it. Thanks, Spike.
Robert Klotz, ROBERTKLOTZ. Line 1 through 3 says to prohibit the use of defendant's discovery of knowledge of a victim's actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity as a defense to a criminal offenses. This is a bill that eliminates an excuse for criminal activity that is an imaginary excuse. No one has the legal right to commit a crime against another person, no matter what reason or excuse they may concoct. If there are no excuses, then the excuse of gender identity already is eliminated as an excuse. The real purpose of this red herring bill is to put into law the sham legitimization of transgenderism and to protect it. The law would bring into existence, by definition, something that really does not exist in reality. This is not to say there are no problems caused by genes, X, Y chromosomes, and testosterone and adrenal failures. But a man with breasts is still a man. Only men impregnate women, and only women get pregnant, even if they have a beard. Being able to demand one's true male or female gender of someone can be important. For example, Karen White of the UK was both a legally and bona fide man who was sent to a woman's prison in the UK because he professed to be a she. White raped 2 female inmates there. The passage of this bill would open Nebraska up to possibly making the same ignorant mistake. Furthermore, I would not want men pretending to be women and going into the school restrooms to check on the status of the children. We do not need teacher Karen Whites here in Nebraska. Vote no on LB166.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify in opposition? Anyone here in a neutral capacity? Seeing none, we have another list of letters that have been received, and I'll try to read those. It's a familiar list. In support, Katie Meidlinger, Ella Durham, Murray Kim, Angela Thomas, Sarah Hannafy of the National Association of Social Workers, Gina Frank, Jenny Goose, Robert Way, Allison Mills, Angie Salahu Phillips, Douglas County Democratic Party Women's Caucus, Kat Nyberg, Kathy Lohmeyer, Catherine Brown, Sherry Howard, Cassie Lotman, Emily Kaziak, Marnie Stewart, Susan Sorrenti, David Harms, Megan Sally, Waylon Werner, Angela Thomas, Brian Bigelow, Sarah Zuckerman, Stephanie Bondi, Pat Tetrault, and in opposition, Donna Owen, Nate Gross from the Nebraska Family Alliance, Tom Vinzer from the Nebraska Catholic Conference, Rob Robo, Jeremiah Lenor, Joe Steffens, Mike McCollen, and with that, Senator Hunt to close on LB 166.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lathrop. As Mr. Eichhold said, he raised his concerns about this bill early on with me, and we worked together pretty much up until this point to try to find a compromise that worked for both of us, and we didn't get there, but I'm still open to talking about it because this is an important issue that obviously affects a lot of people. And so this amendment that I brought, you have an amendment in front of you. This amendment makes it so that it does allow evidence, it allows a jury to consider evidence of somebody's sexual orientation. So we're still working on that a little bit, and I just want you to know that I'm open to it. The point is that someone's sexual orientation is not a reasonable excuse for anybody's violent behavior. And when we allow these defenses to be raised in court, it's a miscarriage of justice, and we're depriving a community of dignity. So we're going to find a way to get to an answer that works for everybody. And this is something that I'm very proud to have brought to the legislature, and it's something we're going to continue to work on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. I'm sorry, Senator Pansy Brooks.
Thank you for bringing this bill, Senator Hunt. It is important and right. Nobody should be able to have some special defense for discriminating against a person or hurting another person. And I also want to thank the people that came here today that have been telling very courageous stories and taking risks that are amazing to help our state move forward. And I know that we all feel very grateful for the effort and passion and willingness to share your stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. I think I'll let you open on 168, or at least tell us where we're at on LB 168.
Thank you, Chairman Lathrop and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Megan Hunt, MEGANHUNT.